Robinson from earlier today talking about a bust from 2020 in Isaiah Wilson.
We did a lot of work a year ago leading up to selecting him. The evaluation process, talking to, different sources, visiting with him countless numbers of times. And for whatever reason, the player that this fall was here in Nashville wasn't the guy that was that we spent time with last year. So I think, he's going to have to make a determination if he wants to do everything necessary to play pro football. And that's going to be, on him.
Played in one game last year as the team's first-round pick. Couple of stints on the COVID-19 reserve list. Some things that weren't really all that smart on his part by way of conduct in connection with the pandemic. And one of the so far, look, there's still plenty chapters left in every book for every player that was drafted last year, Myles. But inspired by those comments from Isaiah Wilson, what we're going to do, we're going to go back and forth with one steal and one bust. So far, this is not the definitive final word on the players. We're not putting anyone in the Hall of Fame. We're not putting anyone in the fan-controlled football league with Johnny Manziel. So one steal, one bust, back and forth. Myles, you're up first.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you presented that in the way that you did, because obviously these things are subject to change after only one season. But I think that so far the steal of the 2020 draft has been Rams safety Jordan Fuller. Now, this guy was a 6th-round pick, but he ended up starting 12 games for the Los Angeles Rams. He had 3 interceptions. He had 5 pass breakups. He picked off Tom Brady twice in November. The cool thing about that was he is also the 199th pick in the draft, just like Tom Brady. So I think that would be a thrill for anybody, who is as young as Jordan Fuller and has basically been alive as long as Tom Brady has been playing football and winning Super Bowls. So that's one thing that's pretty cool for him. My first bust would then be Henry Ruggs, wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders. And it's because he's the number 12 overall pick. Yeah, a bust.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Look, you said it so far, Mike. What else am I supposed to say? He was the first wide receiver off the board. He only had 26 catches for 452 yards. Man, that's bust material after 1 year. I think, especially if you compare him to Justin Jefferson, who had 1,400 yards receiving. Look, I think that Henry Ruggs has a chance to grow and develop. But look, if you're looking at his production in the first season, no, it's not what you expect from the guy who was the first wide receiver taken off the board, and especially when he's in somebody's offense like John Gruden, and John Gruden is known as the offensive guru. He needs to be better, and that is why I think, at least for year one, he is a bust. Mike, who are your first busts and steals?
Well, and let me just say this about being a first-round receiver, especially the first receiver off the board in a draft that has plenty of great receivers. It adds extra pressure. And I agree with you, Henry Ruggs did not perform to the level that we would expect of the first guy taken off the board in a receiver-rich draft. My first steal, guy you've already mentioned, Justin Jefferson with the Vikings rookie receiving yardage record. He was not the first. He was not the second. He was not the third. May have been the 4th receiver off the board. There may have been another one in there by the time the Vikings had a chance to take him. I know he was behind Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, and Jaylen Rieger. So he was at least the 4th one off the board, or at least the 5th one off the board. My math, I just admit that my math sucks. 5th one off the board. Justin Jefferson was awesome. He was awesome last year, and they didn't really discover what they had in Justin Jefferson until week 3. He could have had a couple of additional games where he could have ended up with 1,600, 1,700 yards as a rookie, Myles. So he was great as a steal for the Vikings in the 20s. He should never have been on the board in the 20s in hindsight. My first bust, hey, if you're going to go with a guy who was taken 11th overall, is that what he was? Was he 11th? Is that what it was?
I think so.
Was it 11th? It was between 10 and 15. 12th.
Yeah.
I'll go with the guy who was 5th overall. I think based on what we've seen so far, I love Tua. I love you, Tua. But Joe Burrow, awesome. Justin Herbert taking one spot after Tua, awesome. So far, I mean, when you need a relief pitcher, this is not baseball. When you need a relief pitcher multiple times, when you supposedly are the guy, and they have to bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick to pull the cookies out of the fire, that's not an endorsement of a guy's overall potential or where he currently is. So, look, Tua could turn into a Hall of Famer based on what we've seen so far. I don't think he's on track to make it to Canton.
Oh, well, no, he definitely is not on track. And he was also on my list, so that means I'm going to have to take somebody else. But, okay, I'm going to go with another steal right here that is honestly right up the alley that you were just there, and that's Justin Herbert. Because, really, if you're looking at a quarterback and this guy was picked one spot after Tua, and he looks like he probably could be the best player picked in this particular draft, that's a steal when you get him at 6th overall. And man, I'm telling you, I look at Justin Herbert and I see somebody that can really be one of these top QBs, and it's going to be fun to see what these guys in the AFC West can do and can compete. Imagine if that trade actually does happen with the Broncos and Deshaun Watson, and you've got Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson, and Derek Carr, all in the same division in the AFC West. That could be one of the most fun divisions, I think, in football. And then I'll stay in the top 10 with my next bust. And part of this is because of injury. But again, we're only one season in here. That's going to be Jeff Okudah, the cornerback from the Detroit Lions, picked at number 3 overall. And, like I said, he was hurt. He missed the last bit of the season. But when he was out there, he just didn't look like a number 3 overall pick. And you've even got the new coaches there, whether it's defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, head coach Dan Campbell there in Detroit. They're all saying, man, we got to get Jeff Okudah playing with some more confidence. You shouldn't need that as the 3rd pick in the draft, and as a cornerback, you got to have that stuff inherently. So, again, he can become somebody who's great at cornerback, and maybe that's all he needed was a change of coaches, Mike. But I think at least for right now, he's a bit of a bust at number 3 overall from the 2020 draft.
And they drafted Okudah with the 3rd overall pick because Matt Patricia alienated Darius Slay right out of the gates and had to trade him, so it became a need pick at number 3 instead of best on the board. Best on the board at 3 was Justin Herbert. I can't say Washington should have taken Justin Herbert instead of Chase Young. That's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I wouldn't be upset if they had taken Justin Herbert because it's a more important position, but pass rusher is just a half step below quarterback when it comes to importance, and quarterback plays longer. That's why you get a franchise quarterback, you take him, you run with him, and you keep him as long as you can. But at the absolute latest, 3 should have been the first spot. At 4, the Giants should have taken him instead of Andrew Thomas, and you trade Daniel Jones just like the Cardinals traded Josh Rosen, and then obviously Tua at 5. That's going to torment Dolphins fans, and Dolphins fans get very defensive about this. Like, it's okay for them to be tormented. It's not okay for us to say they should be tormented, but they should be tormented, and they likely are tormented by the fact that the Dolphins took Tua instead of Justin Herbert. All right, next one's for me here. Got to get my notes. Don't want to make any mistakes. I got to go. Well, I'm gonna sandbag one. I'm going to go Chase Claypool with my next one. And Chase Claypool fits a very important profile for me when it comes to receivers who become successful in the NFL. I think that a receiver sliding into round 2 is a valuable mindset. It's a valuable motivator. It's a valuable chip on the shoulder. Michael Thomas, still driven by the fact that he was a 2nd-round pick. You can very easily slip into that diva mentality as a receiver when you're a 1st-round pick. You don't work as hard. You've arrived. When you're a 2nd-round pick and you feel like you've been slighted, you feel like you've been overlooked, you feel like you've been dissed in some way, that lights a fire that may never go out. And I think we saw some of that with Chase Claypool. No way he should have lasted as long as he did on the board. And I think one of the reasons he was so good last year is because he did last on the board as long as he did. Flip it over to bust territory. Hey, I got to do it. Now, look, I understand that they did it for a strategic reason that may have been light a fire under Aaron Rodgers, but I'm sorry. You used a 1st-round pick with a 13-3 team that made it to the NFC Championship. You gave up a 4th-round pick to move up to get him, and he never played in a game all year. Jordan Love, based on what we've seen so far, was a waste of a pick by the Green Bay Packers. And if I'm a Packers fan, and again, they don't want me saying it, but they'll say it to themselves, tormented by what could have been if they'd have had that 1st-round pick and 4th-round pick, 2 different players, 2 different lottery tickets on guys who would have had 18 games under their belts by the time they played in the NFC Championship and would have been on the field, barring injury, contributing to the Green Bay Packers cause. So Nothing against Jordan Love. He may end up being a Hall of Famer. We don't know. But it was a bust of a pick to use that first-round pick and a fourth to go get him. Myles.
Yeah, you said based on what we've seen so far, it's absolutely nothing. We have no idea because he didn't even play in a preseason game because we didn't have him because of the pandemic. And imagine if they would have had T. Higgins, that's somebody who would have been there on the board. Another good young wide receiver. All right, my next steal, I'm going to go with another guy who was picked lower on in that draft. That's L'Jarius Sneed from the Kansas City Chiefs, a guy who was a fourth-round pick. He started 6 regular season games there for the Chiefs and then all of their postseason games. But I think and that's something that you want out of somebody who's picked in those lower rounds and can actually contribute for you on the team. He had 2 sacks. He had 3 interceptions in the regular season. He had 7 pass breakups, and he had a pair of sacks in the postseason too. So I think when you're talking about these guys who are young, who can show things on defense like that versatility, you talk about positionless players sometimes. That's what some defensive coordinators and head coaches in the league like to talk about. I think he's one of these guys that can really help this defense continue to take those steps and be one of these teams that's not just going to be contending because of Patrick Mahomes. They've got to have some good defensive pieces too, and I think he is one of those guys. And then for my last bust, I'm going to go with Jaylen Rieger. All right, so this is another one of these first-round wide receivers, and he was picked just 1 spot ahead of Justin Jefferson, but didn't have a game with more than 55 yards, and I think definitely some of this has to do with the QB and the QB problems that Philadelphia had throughout the entire season. But his top receiving yardage output was 55 yards, and that came in week 1 when he only had 1 catch. So when you're talking about a first-round wide receiver, you want more production than that. It's very similar to me with Henry Ruggs. You just didn't necessarily see it with Rieger. He had 31 catches, 396 yards in 11 games. I just think that especially when you see what Justin Jefferson did a pick later, and who knows what Justin Jefferson would have done if he was playing with Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts in 2020. But I just think right now, if you're an Eagles fan, you're disappointed in the output that you got there from that pick at 21 overall, Mike.
Those are good selections, and Jaylen Rieger was on my list as well. My last steal has got to be a guy who wasn't even drafted. I mean, that counts as a steal. If all the picks went by and his name was never called and you go get him as an undrafted free agent, that's James Robinson, who walks off the street with no offseason program, no preseason to prove himself, wins the starting tailback job, and was awesome as a rookie. And now, with Trevor Lawrence likely to be the new quarterback in Jacksonville, James Robinson in position to really flourish because they'll have a passing game to balance out the running game where Robinson was pretty much all that team had last year. So I think James Robinson was a great, great choice by the Jaguars, and hopefully the new coaching staff will have the same faith in him that the last coaching staff did. And my last bust, I got to go with Justin Rohrwasser, the 5th-round kicker. I can't believe the Patriots pissed away, sorry, London, a draft pick on a kicker. Why is anybody, look, unless it's Ray Guy or Sebastian Janikowski, why are you using a draft pick on a kicker? And then on top of it, there was some controversial stuff about Rohrwasser in the 3%ers group, and I didn't know the tattoo. Baloney BS, and it was a waste of a pick by the New England Patriots, Myles.
Oh, it absolutely was. And that was embarrassing what he said. Oh, I didn't know what this tattoo meant. Come on, man. If you're putting something on your body permanently, I think you probably have a good idea of what it means. After you get to a certain age, especially when you're in high school, I don't believe you when you start talking about, oh, I didn't know. I had no idea. Give me a break.
My first tattoo and last tattoo, if I ever get one, will be Kirk Cousins if and when he wins the Super Bowl MVP award, which I don't have to worry about finding a tattoo parlor that can do a likeness of Kirk Cousins anytime soon. All right, quick look at the results here before we take our break. Myles had as his steals Jordan Fuller, Justin Herbert, and L'Jarius Sneed. I had, Myles bust. He has Henry Ruggs, Jeff Okudah, and Jaylen Rieger. Then from my picks, steals, Justin Jefferson, Chase Claypool, James Robinson, all offense for me. And then Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, and Justin Rohrwasser.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.